rain in New York City doesn't wash away the sins, it just makes them slicker. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in November 1935. The streets of the Bronx were empty except for one man. His name was Marty, the Kid Glickman. He was 19 years old. He was wearing a suit that had cost $40 that morning, but now it was ruined. It was soaked through with rain, with mud, and with something darker. Something thick and copper-smelling that covered his hands, his face, and his white shirt. Marty wasn't running, he was fleeing. He was sprinting as if the devil himself was snapping at his heels. His lungs burned, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He slipped on the wet cobblestones, crashing hard onto his knees, scraping the skin off his palms, but he didn't feel the pain. He scrambled up, hyperventilating, his eyes wide and white in the darkness, looking back over his shoulder at the empty street behind him. Nothing was there, just the rain, just the shadows, but Marty knew better. The shadows in Harlem had teeth. He burst through the doors of the Palace Chop House, Dutch Schultz's headquarters. The restaurant was closed, but the back room was thick with cigar smoke and the smell of whiskey. Dutch Schultz sat at his table, counting a stack of money. 2 bodyguards stood by the door. When Marty crashed into the room, dripping blood onto the expensive Persian rug, the music stopped. The bodyguards drew their guns instantly. Dutch looked up, annoyed. "Marty?" Dutch squinted. He saw the blood. He saw the terror in the kid's eyes, a look of someone who had seen the inside of a coffin and climbed back out. "Jesus Christ, kid, you look like a butcher's apron." Dutch stood up, pushing the money aside. He looked past Marty towards the door. He waited. He waited for the others. He waited for his elite squad, the Dirty Dozen, the 12 best killers money could buy. "Where are they?" Dutch asked. His voice was low, dangerous. "Where is Big Sal? Where is Vinny? Where are the boys?" Marty fell to his knees, his breath coming in jagged, wet sobs. He looked at his hands, covered in the blood of his friends. He looked up at Dutch Schultz, the most feared man in the Bronx, and he whispered the words that would haunt the underworld for decades. "They didn't come out, boss," Marty choked out. The door locked, and then the lights went out. They're gone. They're all gone." Dutch grabbed the kid by the collar. "Who's gone? What happened?" "Everyone," Marty screamed, his voice cracking. "The ghosts got them. He got them. We went into the basement, and only I came out." This is the story of the night Bumpy Johnson proved that you don't need an army to win a war. You just need a dark room, a sharp razor, and the patience of a predator. This is the story of the basement of no return. Let's rewind 24 hours. The war for the Harlem numbers racket had stalled. Dutch Schultz was losing patience. He was losing money. Every day that Bumpy Johnson breathed air was an insult to Dutch's ego. He had tried intimidation. He had tried bribery. He had tried sending small crews to break legs. Nothing worked. Bumpy was like smoke. You tried to grab him, and he slipped through your fingers. So Dutch decided to stop playing games. He decided to burn the board. On Monday afternoon, Dutch assembled a death squad. He didn't want thugs, he wanted exterminators. He called in favors from Brooklyn to New Jersey. He gathered 12 men. These were men who had no conscience, men who had killed for Al Capone during the beer wars, men who slept like babies after strangling a rival with piano wire. They gathered in the back room of the Chop House. It looked like a wolf pack. There was Big Sal Moretti, a man who liked to use a baseball bat a little too much. There was Vinny, the Torch, who got his nickname for obvious reasons. And there was Marty, the new kid, eager to earn his stripes, holding his brand new .38 revolver like it was a toy. The table was covered with weapons,
Thompson submachine guns, the Chicago typewriters, sawed-off shotguns, automatic pistols, enough firepower to invade a small country. Dutch Schultz paced in front of them, a manic energy in his eyes. "Tonight we end it," Dutch spat, slamming his fist on the table. "I'm done with the messages. I'm done with the negotiations. Bumpy Johnson thinks he's a king. Tonight we show him he's just a man who bleeds." He unrolled a map of Harlem. He circled a warehouse on 125th Street. "This is his counting house. We got a tip. Bumpy is going to be there tonight with his top lieutenants. They'll be counting the weekend's profits in the basement. It's a vault. One way in, one way out."
The plan was simple, brutal. "You go in at midnight," Dutch ordered. "You kick down the doors, you go down to that basement, and you kill everything that moves. I don't care if it's Bumpy, his men, or the janitor. You burn it down, you leave no witnesses. You bring me Bumpy's head, and every man in this room gets $5,000. The men cheered. They checked their weapons. They laughed. They were 12 heavily armed professionals going to kill a few bookies in a basement. They thought it would be a slaughter. They thought it would be a turkey shoot. They didn't realize that the tip hadn't come from a snitch. It had come from Bumpy Johnson himself. Midnight, Harlem. The rain had started to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the streets. 2 black vans rolled silently down 125th Street and parked in the alley behind the warehouse. The dirty dozen piled out. They moved with military precision, but their arrogance was loud. They didn't even bother to hide their faces. Why would they? By morning, everyone who could identify them would be dead. Big Sal led the way to the rear entrance. He raised his shotgun to blow the lock, but he stopped. The door was slightly ajar. "It's open," Sal whispered, a confused frown crossing his face. "They're sloppy," Finney chuckled, racking the slide of his Tommy gun. "Let's go." They entered the warehouse. It was a cavernous space, smelling of stale tobacco, dust, and old paper. Moonlight filtered through the high, grimy windows, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. It was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the breathing of 12 men and the click of leather shoes on the concrete floor. "Downstairs," Sal signaled. At the far end of the warehouse, a heavy steel door stood open, revealing a flight of wooden stairs descending into the blackness of the basement. A faint light bulb flickered at the bottom, casting long, eerie shadows against the peeling paint of the walls. Marty, bringing up the rear, felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. Something felt wrong. It felt invited. "Boss," Marty whispered to Sal, "this feels too easy. Where are the guards?" "Shut up, kid. They're probably drunk downstairs, counting our money." The 12 men descended the stairs. The wood creaked under their weight. The air got colder as they went down. It smelled damp, earthy, like a freshly dug grave. They reached the basement floor. It was a large, open room with concrete pillars. In the center, there was a table with a single lamp on it. On the table, there were stacks of paper, but no money, just newspapers cut into the size of dollar bills. "What the hell is this?" Finney asked, stepping forward. And then the trap sprung. Clang! The heavy steel door at the top of the stairs slammed shut. It sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The sound of a heavy iron bolt sliding into place echoed down the stairwell. "What was that?" someone shouted. Before anyone could answer, click. The single light bulb above the table went out. Total pitch blackness. Panic is a funny thing. It spreads faster than fire. For the first 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. 12 killers stood in the dark, their eyes straining to see, their hearts beginning to race. Then the first sound came. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a wet, tearing sound, like a piece of heavy canvas being ripped apart. Shh! Dump! "Tony?" Big Sal called out into the dark. "Tony, say something." Tony didn't answer, but the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor echoed through the room. "Light a match! Someone light a match!" Vinny screamed. "They're in here with us!" someone yelled. "Open fire!" That was the mistake. The hitman opened up. The roar of Thompson's submachine guns was deafening in the enclosed space. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Muzzle flashes lit up the room in strobe light bursts of terror. In those split-second flashes of light, Marty saw them. They were ghosts, Bumpy Johnson's men. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing black turtlenecks and dark pants. They moved barefoot. They didn't have guns. They had straight razors. They had hunting knives. They had ice picks. They moved under the bullets. They moved between the muzzle flashes. The Italians were shooting at shadows, firing wildly into the walls, into the pillars, into each other. The noise was blinding, disorienting. But Bumpy's men, they were silent. They were surgical. Marty backed into a corner, clutching his revolver, shaking so hard his teeth rattled. He watched a horror movie unfold in strobe light. He saw Vinny the Torch firing his shotgun at an empty corner. A hand reached out from the darkness behind him, a black hand holding a gleaming razor. One quick motion across the throat. Vinny gurgled, dropped the shotgun, and clawed at his neck as red spray painted the air. He fell. 11 left. He saw Big Sal swinging his empty gun like a club. "Come out and fight like men!" Sal roared. A figure dropped from the ceiling pipes above him. An ice pick drove into Sal's shoulder, then his chest. He went down with a heavy thud. 8 left. The gunfire began to die down, not because they were out of ammo, but because they were running out of fingers to pull the triggers. It was a symphony of steel and silence, the swish of a blade, the thud of a body, the stifled whimpers of men who realized that their money and their Tommy guns meant nothing in the dark. Marty squeezed his eyes shut. He didn't want to see. He could hear his friends dying. He could smell it, the sharp, metallic scent of fresh blood mixing with the cordite of gunpowder and the sour stench of urine. "Please," Marty whispered to the dark. "Please, God." The screams stopped. The gunfire stopped. The only sound left was the dripping of fluid onto the concrete and the ragged, terrified breathing of the only man left standing. Marty opened his eyes. The basement was silent as a tomb. Scritch! The sound of a match being struck was louder than a cannon. A small flame flared to life in the center of the room. It illuminated a face. Bumpy Johnson. He was sitting at the table in the center of the carnage. He wasn't sweating. His suit was immaculate. He held a cigar to the flame of the match, puffed twice, and shook the match out. The tip of the cigar glowed red, a single eye in the dark. Someone clicked a switch, and a dim service light buzzed on. Marty gasped. The floor was a lake of red. 11 of the Bronx's toughest killers lay twisted in heaps around the room. Their expensive suits were ruined. Their guns lay useless beside them. Standing around the room, leaning against the pillars, wiping their blades on rags, were Bumpy's men. Illinois Gordon, the brooding enforcers of Harlem. They looked calm. They looked like they had just finished a day of work at the factory. Bumpy Johnson stood up. He walked slowly over to the corner where Marty was huddled, trembling like a leaf. Bumpy's shoes made a squelching sound as he walked through the blood of Marty's friends. Bumpy stopped 2 feet from Marty. He looked the kid up and down. He saw the terror. He saw the broken spirit. "What's your name, son?" Bumpy asked. His voice was gentle, almost fatherly. Marty, the kid stuttered. "Well, Marty," Bumpy said, reaching into his pocket. Marty flinched, expecting a gun. Bumpy pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He handed it to the kid. "You have something on your face." Marty took the handkerchief. He didn't dare wipe the blood off. "You're probably wondering why you're still breathing," Bumpy said, lighting his cigar again. "My men, they wanted to finish the set, 12 for 12, but I told them no. I told them we needed a messenger." Bumpy leaned in close. The smell of expensive cologne and tobacco smoke filled Marty's nose. "You're going to go back to the Bronx, Marty. You're going to run all the way back to Arthur." Bumpy used Dutch's real name,
the ultimate disrespect.
You're going to tell Arthur exactly what you saw here tonight. You tell him that his guns don't work in the dark. You tell him that Harlem isn't a prize to be won. It's a graveyard waiting to be filled. Bumpy gestured to the bodies on the floor. And you tell him if he sends 12 more, I'm going to send them back in boxes, piece by piece. Bumpy signaled to the stairs. The heavy steel door creaked open. The cool night air rushed in. "Run, Marty," Bumpy whispered. "Run before I change my mind." Marty didn't wait. He dropped his gun. He scrambled up the stairs, slipping on his own fear, and burst out into the alleyway. He ran. He ran until his lungs bled. He ran away from the monsters in the dark. Back in the Palace Chop House, the silence stretched out for eternity. Dutch Schultz stared at Marty. The kid was sobbing now, broken on the floor. "They're dead?" Dutch asked, his voice hollow. "Big Sal? Vinny?" "All of them," Marty wept. He watched, boss. He sat there and smoked a cigar while they died. He's not a man, boss. He's a ghost. You can't kill a ghost." Dutch Schultz sank back into his chair. The stack of money on the table suddenly looked like just paper, meaningless paper. For the first time in his violent, bloody career, Dutch Schultz felt a cold hand grip his heart. It was fear. He had always believed that power came from the barrel of a gun. He believed that if you hit someone hard enough, they broke. But tonight, he learned a lesson that would cost him his empire. He learned that in Harlem, the shadows bite back. Dutch looked at his own hands. They were shaking. He poured himself a drink, but the glass rattled against the bottle. "Get the kid out of here," Dutch muttered to his guards. "Get him out of my sight." As they dragged Marty away, Dutch Schultz sat alone in his empty restaurant. He looked at the map of Harlem on the wall. He picked up a knife and stabbed it into the map right over the warehouse on 125th Street. But even he knew it was a futile gesture. Bumpy Johnson had won. He hadn't just defeated an attack, he had broken the enemy's soul. He had turned 12 hitmen into a legend that would protect Harlem for 40 years. The police report the next morning was short: gangland disturbance. No bodies were found in the warehouse. Bumpy was tidy. The bodies ended up in the river, or in the foundations of new buildings, or simply vanished into the ether. But on the streets, the story spread like wildfire. The story of the night 12 men went into the basement, and only one came out to tell the tale. And Bumpy Johnson? The next morning, he was seen sitting at the Lenox Lounge, eating breakfast, reading the newspaper, impeccable in a fresh suit. When the waiter asked him how his night was, Bumpy just smiled, sipped his coffee, and said, "Quiet, very quiet." The legend of the Basement Massacre is one of the darkest chapters in Mafia history. It's a reminder that strategy beats brute force, and silence is often deadlier than noise. If this story of Bumpy Johnson's brutal chess game kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. It helps us bring more of these untold stories to light. And you do not want to miss the next video, because next time we're talking about the Betrayal, how Bumpy Johnson made a secret alliance with Lucky Luciano to finally take Dutch Schultz off the board permanently. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and remember, you can fight an army, but you can't fight a ghost. See you in the next one.